as summer turns to autumn and there's a little bit of a chill in the air, then I start wanting a hot meal and a drink when I'm spending the day outside. But the problem is it gets dark so much earlier now that I don't always have time to cook. And that's where I think one of the most underrated pieces of outdoor kit comes into its own. And you might be asking yourself, what is this breakthrough technology that allows us to have a hot meal outside without having a stove and without lighting a fire? Well, it's actually a technology that's been around since 1892, and it is the humble vacuum flask. I think vacuum flasks are ideal when you're out and about because it allows you to take a hot meal or a hot drink, carry it with you and keep it hot for hours on end. So it's the ultimate convenience when you're out and about. And I think that's the main difference between a vacuum flask and a stove, is that convenience. You don't need to stop and find a flat piece of ground or spend time cooking. You can simply unscrew the lid and then you can tuck in. And I think that's really important, particularly when it's cold, because the last thing you want to do is sit down or stand still waiting for food to cook, because the longer you're standing still, you're going to kind of cool off and that's going to allow you to get cold. So actually just being able to unscrew the lid and have instant hot food is actually a really important thing when it's cold. I think the other great big advantage with a vacuum flask is that it allows you to access a wider variety of food too, because some things just aren't very easy to cook outside, and being able to bring that with you is a really great thing, particularly if you've got special dietary requirements. Maybe you need to, avoid certain food things like gluten, which could be in a lot of kind of boil in the bag meals. So being able to access that wider variety is also another huge advantage. And finally, I think you've got to look at the cost of boil in the bag meals, because if you're paying full price for a boil in the bag meal, then they are quite pricey. And just being able to use a homemade meal or a shop bought equivalent is definitely going to work out cheaper in the long run. And I think the main disadvantage of using a food flask over a stove is that you typically only get one hot meal out of a food flask, while you will get multiple hot meals out of a stove. That said, there's nothing stopping you actually refilling your flask when you're on the go if you have a stove as well, and then saving a hot meal for extra. And that's typically what I do. If I'm out and about and I'm cooking, I'll generally boil extra water. I'll have a drink there and then I'll also take a hot drink with me to go. And even if you're one of these people who just enjoy cooking outdoors, and a lot of people do, there's whole channels devoted to that, then a food flask can be really useful still, because it'll allow you to carry your raw meat and keep it safer for longer. And if you freeze it before you put it in or pack out with ice, it's going to last even longer. That's what they used to do with fish in the old days. When we used to buy fish from a shop, before they had access to refrigerators, it would be in a vacuum flask sealed cabinet. So it's definitely still an option for you. One of the great things about vacuum flasks is that they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes to suit different needs. And when it comes to being outside for the day, then the following two are my absolute favourites. Now, this little red guy, this is a Thermos Stainless King food flask. And I was actually bought this by my wife about 5 or 6 years ago. So this video isn't sponsored, I just think this is a really great bit of kit. Now, because it's short and it's wide like this, it makes it ideal for food. And in fact, if you look at the top here, it's actually got a little foldable spoon stored in the top. And I can't tell you how many times that saved me when I've forgotten my spork. So really, really nice feature to have. Now, this particular flask, this one is 470 millilitres. So it is enough for a meal. When you think, one of those pouch meals is about 300 grams. This will take about 470, so it's pretty good for that. If you do have a larger appetite, however, they do a 710ml one, and that will also keep food hotter for longer as well. And when it comes to drinks, I rarely go anywhere without this, which is my Highlander ammunition pouch flask. And it's called an ammunition pouch flask because this has been designed to fit perfectly into a NATO standard ammunition pouch. And when I was an instructor, I had one of these permanently in my webbing. And again, I bought this one myself from my own money, since it isn't sponsored. I just think this is a really great flask, and I use this an awful lot. This comes with me pretty much everywhere. If I'm going to work, if I'm going on the train, anytime I'm going to be at the house for a couple of hours away from the kettle, this one is going to come with me, and this has probably saved me hundreds of pounds on just not buying a tea or a coffee when I'm in town. And as you can tell, it's pretty beaten up because it gets used that much. This isn't the most efficient flask in terms of keeping drinks hottest for the longest. It's quite small, it's 330 mils, and they tend not to be as good in terms of keeping drinks hot, that is. But because it's so small and light, that's what makes it convenient. And because it'll keep drinks hot at least for a good, say, 4 hours or so, it's perfect for what I need it for, and I would highly recommend this. If I wanted to go out all day and I was going out and I wanted drinks at the end of the day, then I've also got a thermos stainless steel drinks flask, and that is definitely a lot better. I think that lasts about 14 hours in terms of keeping drinks hot. But for just regular use, can't beat this. Absolutely brilliant. Now, if you are thinking about buying your own flask, the first bit of advice I'd give you is always go for a stainless steel type rather than the glass type, because the stainless steel is that just, more robust, and it's better suited to life outdoors and living in the bottom of your rucksack. I have had a couple of the glass ones before the stainless became widely available, and they've all broken. So I think stainless steel is definitely the way to go. The second bit of advice I'd give you is, I think vacuum flasks are one of the few things where it's worth paying a little bit extra to get a branded name like a Thermos or a Stanley, rather than kind of a cheap unbranded one, because you know what you're getting, and there's a massive difference in performance between a good quality flask and a poor quality flask. And to illustrate this point, I did a bit of home science, and what I did was I took my Thermos stainless steel King, and I got an unbranded, a supermarket own brand food flask as well. I took a very sophisticated food thermometer, which I bought on eBay for £2, but we won't worry about the accuracy of the thermometer because it would have applied equally to both flasks, and the difference was so great it wouldn't have mattered anyway. When I put the boiling water into the thermos, it was 95 degrees centigrade, and 8 hours later it came out at 63.8 degrees centigrade, which is a really good score, really good performance, and that actually meets Food Standard Agency regulations for a hot buffet if you go to a restaurant. So it performed really well. When it came to the supermarket own brand flask, the water went in at 94.5 as I closed the lid, so 0.5 degrees cooler, but it came out 8 hours later 34.8, which was tepid, barely lukewarm. You'd want to reheat that before you ate it again. So the difference there was so vast that I think it's worth paying extra to get a branded and a good quality flask. And that's for this little guy. He did really well considering his size. The temperature went in at 95 degrees again, and it came out at 54.4. So a really good score considering this is only a 330ml flask. And that's the next point I want to get across to you, is all things being equal, if you've got the same shape, size and kind of construction, then a flask with a larger volume generally does a better job at keeping things hotter or colder for longer than the smaller one. Now, if you take the Thermos, the one I have is 470 mils and it's rated for 9 hours. But if you take its bigger brother, which is 710 mils, then that one is rated for 14. So that's something you definitely want to consider. But also think about the size and the shape, because even though this isn't the most efficient flask, this one I'm going to use the most. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.